I really don't know anything more, Inspector. She had no one outside the family? No close friends? I never heard of any. She adored a canary I gave her one Christmas. It was almost sad, the way she fussed over it, as though, well, you know what I mean. If she had had children. He nodded again, as though even a male could understand that vicarious maternity of Emily Lancaster's. I get you. No reason then to suppose that the old gentleman disliked her, or was afraid of her, or anything like that? None whatever, I said rather stiffly. Why on earth should he do either? He ignored that, pinching his lip thoughtfully. Humphrey. Well, what about Miss Margaret? Not so even-tempered as her sister, I understand. Gets angry easily, isn't that it? She's over it in a minute, Inspector. Do you think the family knew about this affair with Dalton? No. I don't think it was an affair. Maybe. Maybe not. Then according to you there's no story in that house. Just a lot of elderly and middle-aged people living their own lives, until someone comes along and without reason wipes out two of them. Is that it? I can't see it any other way. All peaceable and calm, until the old lady begins to hoard that gold under her bed, and somebody who knows about it takes it out and loads the bags with dress weights. But that's not so strange as it sounds, I told him. We all have them. We all use them. I remember seeing a lot of them in a keg in the Lancasters' woodshed last spring. Miss Margaret was potting some plants, and putting them in the bottoms of the pots. But I imagine she used them all. He was thoughtful for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and drew out his notebook. After examining it, he glanced at me. What about this seamstress, anyhow? She must know a lot about this crescent, and the people in it. Is she a tall thin woman, angular, with gray hair? Miss Mamie. No. She's very short and very fat. Can you place such a woman, anywhere in the crescent? Only Miss Lydia Talbot, and a maid of theirs, Lizzie Cromwell. Our own cook, Mary, is rather like that, too. All right, he said as he put the book away. Now we're up to the Talbots, and a queer kettle of fish they are. What do you know about them? What goes on behind those barred windows and locked doors? Or do you know? I tried to tell him. How Mrs. Talbot rarely left her room at the back of the house, but sat there with her doors locked doing enormous quantities of crocheting. Not a house in the Crescent but duly received its gift at Christmas of some terrible thing which it was supposed to use and display, and reading voraciously book after book. How she dominated her household, which was all in deadly fear of her except Lizzie Cromwell, who had been there for years, and in less degree George Talbot himself. How she measured out each morning the day's supplies from the store closet off the kitchen, and then locked the door, and how woe betide any cook who demanded an extra egg or spoonful of tea thereafter. Also how her sister-in-law, Miss Lydia, had to live there because it was all the home she had, and although she did the buying, was carefully audited to the last cent. And yet, with all of this, how Mrs. Talbot was the first on hand in case of trouble, as witness her visits to Mrs. Lancaster, who was her sister-in-law by her first husband and who, in view of the fact that Mrs. Talbot had been deserted by that husband's brother, might well enough have been let alone, or ignored. He listened carefully, his eyes intent and penetrating. Good friends, were they? He asked. She didn't resent Mrs. Lancaster's second marriage, or anything like that? I think they had been better friends in the past few years, I said cautiously. Before that there was some sort of trouble. I've never known what.